do you see any commonalities for people being better at forming habits than others? Um, just generally in your coaching work?
Yeah. So what I've come to understand is that almost everybody has behaviors they won't find an easy way to change. And it
Mm,
usually, as cliche as this sounds, usually goes back to some stuff in your childhood.
mm,
And so for one person, maybe their parents gave them food when they did a good job and maybe they didn't have a lot of love otherwise, got treats or something. And so now they have a hard time not giving themselves candy or something because that was the sign of love to themselves. Whereas another person, food wasn't used that way. Like they have no stress about eating whatsoever,
mm.
but they have a hard time not working or something else. So I think what I've come to understand is, zeroing in on the food one for just a moment as an example, something like 90% of people who are really overweight or obese have emotional and relationship issues with food. And so the cool thing is there's absolutely ways to solve, and then there's ways to make it easier physiologically and psychologically. And so there's ways to solve all of these challenges. Um, but it's really a question of like, where are your challenges? So some people have a hard time investing in themselves and don't want to spend money on themselves. Some people have no problem with that, but then have challenges elsewhere. And then some people are just, happy with life and everything's great and God bless them. But I think almost everybody has an area of their life that's being driven subconsciously. And all this is about is figuring out where that is and what's standing in your way, and then helping people figure out why that's happening. And then once you figure it out, there's a fairly straightforward process to defang that issue.
What is that process? Is that something you all work on with your clients?
Yeah, I do this work with some of our clients, and then we also have some outside specialists who we'll work with, who specialize, for example, in food. I'll give a call out to a colleague of mine named Irene Pace, who does food relationship issues. But what I'll do is the first thing is let's figure out exactly why this challenge is there. And there's a variety of techniques to do it. But for example, one of them is called the downward arrow. So let's say somebody is procrastinating, having an issue, and that's leading them to not sleep at night because they're not finishing their work. So be like, okay, so why is it hard to start this project? They'll be, well, I'm tired. It's important I do a good job. Well, why is it important to do a good job? Well, if this is for an important client, and if I don't get it done, or if I don't do a good job, then the client won't be happy. What happens then? Well, then the client won't repeat their business, won't refer us business. What happens then? Well, the revenue of the business will suffer. What then? Profitability will suffer. The business will fail. What then? I'll end up alone. And so what just happened is somebody just went through and sort of unintentionally into their deep psychology, which is like, okay, it's true you're tired and it's harder to do a good job when you're tired. It's true that this is an important client. All those steps were basically reasonably accurate, except for the if my business fails, I'll end up alone. Right? Like that shows there is a deep kind of driver of fear of loneliness, something under it. And the cool thing is, every one of those steps you could mitigate. Well, like, turns out, obviously, the solution to um, having the client be happy is to actually do the thing now and not wait. But when your subconscious reaction to doing something is, if I start this now, I'll end up alone. Well, no, I mean, like, of course you're having challenges starting it, but there are ways to repattern that, which are like, even just doing that exercise I did turns on your top down cognitive brain to think through the why am I doing this? Then you can use kind of exposure therapy and other approaches that are like, hey, I'm going to start, I'm just going to do a little bit and see how it works. And you're like, oh, I wrote, the first paragraph and I actually feel okay. And now I can do more. So there's exposure therapy. And then the other piece is to figure out how to teach your brain that the thing that it subconsciously thought was scary is not scary. And so it's really this mechanism of gaining awareness and then turning those cues um, from ones of threat into ones of safety. And the cool thing we're doing physiologically is, if I'm working with somebody, helping them work through the challenge as a coach. But then on the other side, I'm physiologically giving them more energy. And by the way, if you're really tired at night, it's going to be harder to keep the subconscious stuff out. So now I'm giving you more energy, more focus, more motivation. It's going to be easier to run the playbook to get the things done. So it's really about supporting someone physiologically and psychologically. And that's, I don't work with a ton of coaching clients anymore because I run a company. But when I do, it's because clients really want to go deep into both the psychology and the physiology. And frankly, I find putting those together to be incredibly fun.
If our listeners out there take anything away from today, I hope it will be Andrew's experimenting. I'm experimenting. Everyone should be experimenting, trying new things and figuring out whether they make us feel better or worse, or understanding how they impact us, because we have the ability to control many, many things.
And you hit something that's really, really close to my heart there. So I've got to jump in.
Please.
Most people think they need blood work to run experiments or even a wearable. The most powerful outcome variable is how you feel. If some people have a harder time kind of intercepting and sensing how they feel, but if something makes you feel better in like 90% of cases, if it makes you feel better over a period of weeks, not just one time, it's going to be good for your health long term. And if something makes you feel worse day to day, it's probably not great for you. So just how you feel, energy levels, mood, focus, your gut, just even noticing those things are probably the most powerful outcome variables that you can track. And hey, if you can add the wearable and the blood work, fantastic. I love that. But even if you don't, just find what makes you feel better. And I'm not talking about feeling better 10 minutes after you eat sugar and then feeling crappy later that day. But if something makes you feel consistently better, that's really a really good sign.
I love that. I love that. That's so true for me. I have this light on my desk that helps with my circadian rhythm. And I notice whenever I travel and I don't have it, I just feel more tired throughout the day versus, with this light on, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel awake, alert. So try things, see how you feel. You don't necessarily need blood work. It's so needed right now because there is so much. I mean, the space is so crowded, and it feels like our evolutionary consciousness is so much more aware of our health and longevity. And, the world appears hungry for this from my perspective, but there are a lot of voices and it's hard to know what's true, what's not. And I also imagine it's hard. And this is, I imagine, part of the reason that you have started going down the path of creating this AI, recommendation engine, is that what's true for one person is not necessarily true for another. And so trying to find things that are, broadly, communicatable can be challenging.
I think that's why I want to communicate like, hey, nothing works for everybody. Here's this method of N of one experimentation. I just wrote a 4-part series of this on my blog about how to run these N of one experiments. And then, hey, here's the tips and tricks. Like, of the 20 diets, which ones seem to work better for which people, which ones have more muscle loss and how to offset that. People need to get a sense of even where to start. And I could give you the top 20 and you could read through and be like, oh, this is the one that sounds like it's going to fit best for me. And then try it. And if it doesn't work, you have 19 other options. And if it does work, fantastic. And I can increase the probability it's going to work. So I totally agree. And I love that you're thinking a lot about the environment around us because, whether it was like the Chinese drywall off-gassing horrible toxins from buildings built in 2000s to light and temperature, there are a lot of things that you can make automatic in your environment that make us feel and perform better where we don't even have to think about it. And that is the best case scenario. That's way better than a habit, right? Like if the lights just automatically go less blue for me, that's a heck of a lot better than having to think about it and doing it and then I forgot about it. Like the fact that you're working on the environment side is incredibly powerful.